And we're live. Hi, I'm Jason Hogan. I'm an instructional designer here at UPI. Trying out the Twitch stream for the first time as one of my colleagues in the United States of America decided to give a shot to get an instructional design stream going, see if we could form a community around instructional design here on Twitch. And that's Brittany Brown O'Donnell, who might be in the stream itself. So today I wanted to look at one of the tools that I'm working on here at UPI. It's a tool that we're going to be, is hopefully going to be used by faculty members that want to improve their course but don't necessarily know what they would like to do going into the course, or maybe they don't have an idea of where their course might want to make some improvements. Or maybe they want to get their course evaluated by somebody else in the faculty, a prof in another department, and just creating this tool that allows that process to happen. So I've already developed a little bit using a course checklist that was created for MOOCs, and tailoring it a little bit to some of the stuff that we have going on, and reworking some of the language to match the philosophy in our instructional design office here on campus. So I'll go over the tool itself and talk about it. The very first thing that you might notice is that it is a Google spreadsheet. And this is pretty deliberate. We're first and foremost, we use Google on campus. We use Gmail, Google Drive, and those sorts of things. So our documents, this is a good way for getting collaborators to participate in that sort of document. But also what we want is we want the tool to be very flexible. We want people to be able to add their own criteria, perhaps remove things that they don't think are applicable to their course if they're sharing it with a peer, and to be able to rework it and adjust it, because we don't want this to be like to be seen as a disciplinarian thing. We want it to be a tool that will be good for someone who's looking to make their course better and wants to find input without it being forced, or without being like this rigid structure, like something that you might have with like Quality Matters. So up at the top, we have some brief instructions that they can make a copy. We're going to host a single version of it that would be like our standard options, the one that we would probably use in the office if a faculty member wanted to use that if they're having a face-to-face meeting with us. And we want to encourage others to make a copy of it and make any changes that they want whenever they're developing their own course, and they have their own criteria. And it comes pre-filled with our suggested criteria. So the first thing is that it's broken up into different topics. It starts with a general overview, and then a look at learning objectives, which is probably one of the first things that instructors might change, depending on whether or not they focus on learning objectives, learning outcomes, or some other structure for their course. After that is assessment, course materials, the learner, looking at the student, course technology, support resources, and a section to really encourage instructors to add their own criteria for that course itself. So I'm going to go back to the top, and the language here isn't really finalized, and I'd actually really appreciate a lot of input if anybody's there in the chat, or if they saw the link going around on Twitter. If you want to reply on that format, that'd be good. but I'll go through just a line by line kind of read through. Um, One more thing to note is that we've added this not applicable category, and that's just to, again, make it so that it's obviously not a disciplinarian tool. We don't want it to be a hammer or something like that. Um, we want to encourage instructors to take and adapt this. Um, so the purpose of the course is clearly stated. The structure of the course is clearly explained, and there are clear instructions on how to start the course. So one thing with our focus primarily on online courses, one thing that I don't really see too often is clear instructions on how to start. So just even thinking about how that's set up in your course, like if it's done through an email or something like that, um, just something that makes the orientation to the course itself, especially if it's like a first year course or somebody hasn't taken an online course before, um, that can be a huge help. And it's not something that might be immediately obvious if you're taking a course that's in a face to face format. And um, uh, if you're taking a course that's previously been in a face to face format, that might be something that you might not have built in. So I'm just zooming in a little bit. 125 sign. So hopefully that's a little bit more clear. Um, Prerequisite knowledge and skills are clearly stated. This might be something that might be in the course description and the course calendar, um, but it wouldn't hurt to reiterate that in a course description or your course syllabus. Uh, Expectations for etiquette are clearly stated. If you're doing an online discussion forum, um, this is something that's really key. And etiquette isn't necessarily just about being how you present yourself and being kind to others in an online environment, um, but also what the expectations are for how long you post and how long you leave, uh, how long you should put forward your topics so that others have a chance to reply before a deadline. So timeliness is also a matter of etiquette in an online environment, um, as well as mindfulness around tone without presenting maybe like your face or body language, unless somebody wants to like record video or something like that, which would be cool. Um, Required course materials, technologies, softwares are listed and linked if applicable. So that's just something for curating your course so that students have easy access to the course materials. They know where to get things. So if you're making heavy use of a piece of software, having a link to that piece of software in the early on in the course description or in the course syllabus or in the top level of a section of a course online, and just removing that step of searching and expecting students to be able to find this software, and making sure that those links are still active is a really good practice. Required and optional course materials technologies are clearly distinguished. So if you're using a piece of software that might be a paid piece of software, but it's not a required piece of the course, making sure that that's obvious, that students don't have to purchase the software because we're not going to be reliant on it, or maybe you can partner with somebody else, making sure that those options are available to students versus a required piece where everybody needs to buy into this course material, is a really important part. Minimum technical skills expected of the student are clearly stated. Just letting students know what they're getting into. Links to resources are explicitly labeled. I like to do this for like things like YouTube and that kind of stuff, especially for mobile users. Um, if a student sees a resource and it's a website, knowing that it's a YouTube video, so that a student can make an informed choice whether or not to click that link if they're on their mobile device, like if they're on a cell phone on a bus, just so that you're not eating up students' data. And it's just a good practice for yourself, knowing where your links are going to. So if you have that course and you're proving some of the resources from year to year, that'd be a good thing to know. There's an Introduction to each instructor. This is about adding social presence to your course. Uh, let your students know a little bit about who you are, and hopefully that will help facilitate some of that student to instructor connection, and maybe encourage students to connect with each other and introduce themselves back and get to know the class. And I know that social presence can be a really hard thing to do online, but that's one way of starting it. There's a place or method for students to introduce themselves. Again, building social presence and allowing students to participate. Uh, the next section is on learning objectives. The learning objectives are described in terms of what a student will be able to achieve upon completion. And that's probably one of the more sticky points for whether or not instructors are on the same philosophy of that. That's something that we have in our office. That's something that me and the other instructional designers agree on for our definition of a learning objective. But again, the instructor, if they want to go the route with outcomes, they're more than welcome to make those changes to this. And I hope that those instructions are clearly labeled. The learning objectives are at an appropriate level. The next section is assessment. The grading policy and assignment policy are clearly stated. Even just things on when students can expect marks back, how much everything is valued, uh, those sorts of things that usually come in your typical syllabus. Clear instructions are provided on evaluations and assessments. So if you are using a rubric to grade the students, providing the rubric beforehand is a really great idea. Just to let students know what the expectations are, how much they're supposed to invest in order to really exceed in the assessments. The assessments propose achievement of the stated learning objectives. Um, Again, make sure that your assessments are lining up with what you want their students to accomplish, and hopefully, like that might be performing well on a standardized test in a lot of programs that have professional kind of certification components, or maybe it's case competitions. Just making sure that your assessments are providing use and learning to the students, and not just for being able to evaluate student achievement. The course uses multiple assessment strategies inclusive of all learners. Um, and that's something to think about is if your course is entirely based on tests, you might be really hurting students that have test anxiety. Whereas if you allowed them to excel in writing or assignments or another assessment that you would probably find really like an enjoyable departure from perhaps a traditional assessment method, providing that avenue might be something that good, might be something that's really good for you. But that's dependent on the course itself. And again, you can edit this document. Students are able to assess their own learning throughout the course, and that's just something that really benefits students, knowing how they're doing, being able to be aware of what they know, what they're struggling with, providing that formative feedback is really good. Final exams are scheduled through the registrar's office. So final exams here on campus, you register through the registrar's office to avoid scheduling conflicts, and that's something that we do on our campus. And that's really there to remind, especially online courses, which don't typically go through the registrar's office, to also go through that process, just so that if you have like an 8-hour window where students can write that online exam, that they're not also doing two other exams right on top of each other, and you're asking a lot of students without necessarily knowing that you're asking that much of them. Student assessments have been reviewed to ensure that answers haven't been compromised. And this is one of the ones where I'm not really happy with the language on. We had a question bank that we found was available entirely online, and we had to work with an instructor to develop those new questions in order to re in order to adequately assess the students. And the issue with that is that it was halfway during the course. that this came up that we realized that the question bank from the previous year had been made available. And there's some level of using the same test bank the same, but you can do that. But it's about writing questions and being aware of what students have available to them. So one thing that I always recommend that is Googling a lot of your questions and just seeing what information comes up at just a click away. And if you want to incorporate that information into the assessment to make it a little bit more of a kind of like a realistic approach, students having access to information and being able to work with that information or to accomplish whatever's been set out in front of them. And again, that's not going to be reflective of every environment. Sometimes they're going to have like a standardized professional test that they have to write in an isolated context, and you want to prepare the students for that. And there's different methods for that also. But making sure that your question banks haven't been compromised, especially in an online setting, is very important, especially year to year, semester to semester, course to course. Course resources have been reviewed by the instructors, and that's just making sure that if you're doing a course-to-course import, that you go through, make sure that your documents have are up to date. You haven't accidentally uploaded something that you don't want to put in that course that year. Maybe some of the things have been outdated by new documents that you've added or new content or new assessments, and just doing that cursory check of, yes, this is good, yeah, no, I don't want that, and just double checking the course information that you're importing. Instructional materials are representative of current and or historical perspectives on content, and that's just something about making sure that you're not just drawing from a single well in a lot of cases, and managing maybe the instructor bias for the material that you're bringing. Course materials, the relationship between the instructional materials and the learning activities is clearly explained to the students, and that's just something that really helps provide motivation and context for the students. Course materials are presented in a consistent structure and layout. That's just formatting. Especially if you're making things during the course, if it's the first run, making sure that you're staying or building at a reasonable quality that you would ask students to read or engage with. Media elements use adopted format and standards that are accessible to all students. So making sure that you're not using like some like if you're using .dox or .docx, often students are going to have access to it, and a lot of programs will convert. But if you're using WordPerfect, you might be asking a lot of students to get around in order to open those files. And just making sure that your formats, even though WordPerfect was a thing many years ago, it may not be as accessible as you assume, and just double checking, and just even asking the students if they can open the files year to year, just at the start, and having backups for to allow students to be able to in the event that they can. So having PDFs are usually pretty good as a backup, but not often the best format. Appropriate course resources are selected to support the learning outcomes. All resources and materials are appropriately cited. Model good behavior in your course. If you're a course that is research heavy and expects proper citations, it's a really good way to model that in your course. Copyright clearance has been attained when necessary. It's pretty important. Links are relevant and functional. Make sure that your links aren't broken, especially if you have like links in like a PDF. Just double check those. A lot of websites come and die over the years. Just make sure that your links are functional, and if not, find replacements or workarounds. Content is still illustrated through multiple forms of media and offers alternatives to text. Don't just hit one type of media. If you're only asking students to read, you might be losing out on students uh, that enjoy listening to things. Media is a different form of presentation, video, um, and those kind of formats. Text is pretty good now because of things like screen readers and um, text text to speech. So providing text files is still very very useful and very good when you can. But making sure that you provide other avenues to engage with your the course materials and with yourself. Learning activities foster appropriate levels and types of interaction, instructor to student, content to student, and student to student. So again, add variety to your course and help establish those different connections in a course, especially if you're in a connectivist school. Those are important. Clear standards are set for instructor responsiveness and availability, turnaround time for the email and assignment marking. If you don't want to respond to emails during the weekend or during after a certain time at night, like that's totally fine. Um, and letting your students know that so that they have expectations and they're not like constantly replying to you at the last minute whenever their assignments failed and that kind of thing. Um, and letting students know about that expectation is uh, another good thing for them to know. The requirement for student interaction and progression through the course are clearly articulated. Students have choice in the media they use to submit their work, and that's something for that we've adapted from UDL, uh, letting students present themselves in the way that they best can, and often you get students' best work whenever they have the choice in the media that they work in. Sorry, I'm just going to read one of the comments. So, uh, got a comment about reading over. So one of the things with this checklist, self-assessment as I want to call it, because the checklist again sounds super disciplinarian, um, is making it so that it doesn't seem like a cold, dead, hateful document, um, and making sure that everybody that looks at this document is aware that they can edit it and change it and adapt it and share it. Um, and the suggestion was to do a read through of it like this. So right now I'm recording this stream. Um, the goal is to break down kind of these sections and a video, maybe a walkthrough, like a screen capture like this. Once it's a bit more finalized, would be a good idea. So that's something that I'm definitely gonna put in the back burner. Thank you, Brittany. Actually, Brittany again being the person that I think started people streaming instructional design on Twitch. So hopefully that continues to be a thing. Um, Collaborative tools are provided to facilitate any group work or discussion. If you're asking students to do group work in a course, even if it's a face-to-face course, and letting them know that they have access to Google Drive, Google Spreadsheets, they have access to a collaborate breakout room where they can meet and work, or they have access to a Hangout. Um, and letting them know what tools they have accessible to that would be really useful. Um, just to facilitate that group work, because so much of it happens online now. There are methods for students to submit suggestions, and this is something that I find useful, is student feedback. And it was something that during my time, actually as a student teacher, was one of the things that I was really keen on getting, was halfway checks, checks after assessments, and just checking with the students, seeing how things were going, see what their input was, see if they had any suggestions or cool things that they wanted to share. Um, because ultimately, like the students can provide real great insight into the course and can really contribute, especially if you invite them. There are methods for students to contribute resources. Maybe it's just tweeting at you. Maybe you have a Dropbox link on your course. Um, Maybe there's a forum for students to share things either towards the course or maybe just like, hey, I really like this song and I thought that other people would really enjoy it because I find that it's super good for studying for this course and those kind of things. Um, Activities and tasks are relevant to learners, personalized, cultural, socially relevant, inclusive of diverse groups. And that's again a question about uh, balancing biases, making sure that we're balancing assumptions about the students. Course technologies are current. If you're using WordPerfect, you might want to take a look at this. Making sure that the versions that you're using are also up to date would be another good interpretation of this. Navigation through the online components is logical, consistent, and efficient. Are things buried in documents? Um, can you have a lot of resources at the top level? Are you making too much clutter? Um, and just looking at the design of the course itself. Instructions on how to access resources at a distance are sufficient and easy to understand. Um, if you have to go through like a proxy in order to sign into the library because you're in Toronto, um, making sure that you have the resources available to students beforehand can make things a lot easier. If not, perhaps there's something that can be done either with partnership with those that you need to connect with, and just being aware of that before you go into the course. It's like letting students know how to log in and stuff like that through email if they haven't used your online learning management system before is another good thing. Instructions on how to access resources that required and optional tools are readily available to students, and clear instructions to get any required tools. So again, if you're requiring students to get software for your course, giving them instructions on how to download it if they need to, install it if they need to, any particular plugins that they need to get for it. Make sure that those are all clearly explained. Students are informed if there's a cost. Students are informed if it's an optional thing and they don't have to do it in the first place. Just letting that kind of information and getting that information and putting it in the course is super useful for students. Synchronous activities are archived for students to review. So if you do a collaborative online synchronous session, making sure that that class is preserved so that students that aren't there or are at a time zone that they can't participate have access to review those materials after. Um, just to make sure that you're not biasing by geography, essentially. Um, the course instructions make it clear how the institution or program's academic support systems can be accessed. So if a student has um, a learning need that they need help with, or they don't know, maybe they're having difficulty with the library documents or something like that, making sure that students know how to get that help, whether they have to contact you and you'll find that for them, or whether or not some course links are available to them. So if you're doing a course that's specifically, maybe you're looking at a course with some really difficult content, um, and maybe you connect students to the information that they need if they want to talk to a counselor about some of the information that they've seen, um, because it's deeply personal or traumatic or something like that. The course instructions answer basic questions related to research, technology, or link to tutorials that provide. Course instructions answer basic questions related to research, writing, technology, or link to tutorials or other resources that provide the information. So again, um, making sure that students uh, have know the expectations, um, know where they can get help if, say, you're doing like a research essay, know that have the resources so that students know what they're expected to produce and create, where they can get the help that they need. So maybe students want to access something like a writing help center or something like that, and providing the information for those. Tutorials for things like if they're creating a video and you're asking them to use iMovie, providing tutorials for how to do editing in iMovie, at least like a playlist of those videos or a place where they can get those videos will be super useful. And again, a section for my criteria. So again, that invitation to add, these are the things that I think I do really well in my course, and I want to make sure that I get feedback on them. These are the things that I think that I'm needing help on. These are the things that I don't know if I don't know. Like just the things that I want instructors to focus on if this is being peer evaluated. So I'm going to switch over to Photoshop just to write down some of the things. So one of the suggestions for this tool was a video look at each section. I'd also like to do a blog post on each section and split the media so that instructors that prefer text to video have that option also. And I definitely need to look at the header information. Making sure that that's accessible and informative. And I should make a tutorial video that's embedded in the document itself on how to copy and edit. Of course, development, self-assessment. So I'm in the chat. If anybody has any feedback, I know that there's a delay of like a minute, but if anybody has any feedback or wants me to go back through any of the sections or any suggestions on how I can present this this checklist to make it something that's useful in the way that I really like to see it be useful as like a self-built kind of assessment that we're just providing the foundation for. That'd be super appreciated. I'm just gonna check Twitter. Yeah, I have some text at the top of the course development checklist. But if I can embed a video link, that might be more useful, especially if it's a screencast and it shows how to get the information from there most easily. And if you're seeing this later and you have any suggestions, you can just send me a tweet. I'm at Hutch_Hogan on Twitter. That'd be super appreciated. And once we make this something that we're really proud of, we'll be sharing it out there. We use some of the criteria from, again, that MOOC quality checklist, which is CC by SA. So this document itself, because of that copyright, or because of the Creative Commons license there, will be also out in the open. It'll be shared, and I'll be tweeting it, and hopefully very proud of it when it's all said and done. So I think for now, we're going to call it. Thanks to the couple of viewers that are in the stream. I super appreciate you hanging out. Thanks again to Brittany for your suggestion. I think the video will be, it should be good, and it's something that will be fun to make it. And Brittany and I, at least, will be looking at figuring out how to get more instructional design streams going on Twitch. So I expect to be working through a couple more projects online on stream over the next few months at least. So again, thank you, and have a great day.